Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Monday. It's May 18th, 8:30. So it's another installment of Morning Cheer Mondays. My name is Stephen Weaver, and I have the joy and privilege of serving as the president and CEO of Sandy Cove Ministries. And I will tell you, it was a fantastic weather weekend here in Northeast Maryland. We had beautiful weather. It was good to be up in this area and to see the Chesapeake Bay looking beautiful and seeing the sun out on it. The only drawback to that is my allergies have kicked in a pretty full force throughout the weekend, and so if you hear me sounding stuffed up, that's probably just me reacting to the fact that every tree decided to send their pollen my way. But last week we got word from Governor Hogan here in the state of Maryland that they were easing up on some things, and as of Friday kind of moved into a safer at home move with some opportunities that we're trying to navigate and figure out what next looks like for us. One of the things is our seasonal campground for those that come and spend the whole season with us is opening up. I think today was actually the first day you could kind of move in and then start staying probably this weekend. And then we'll be able to, I think, open up for transient business in both of our campgrounds this weekend and beyond, which we're excited to just kind of do whatever we can do. And we're still navigating a season where there's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot more questions than there are answers. And those of you who know that I was the program guy before I was this guy know that drives me absolutely crazy. And I will tell you that we are trying to figure out how to do something. And so we're not exactly sure all of what that looks like, but we're trying to figure out how to do something. And especially for our family camp, we are committed to this weekend. We'll have an answer of what it's going to look like. But one of the things is what I can tell you is I shared this with our team a week or two ago is, our mission and our vision at Sandy Cove, they don't require our property. That's how we've used our mission and our vision. But our mission and vision are kind of what drives us. That's what keeps us going. And so we are trying to figure out how to do it. And we believe that there are new ways and there are ways where our mission and vision can be lived out and experienced on our property and then beyond our property. And this here, doing the Morning Cheer broadcast on both Facebook and YouTube, is one of those opportunities to do something where we can give you a resource and talk to our good friends throughout the ministry that have great content and are encouragers in God's words. And so I had reached out early on in the planning to this to one of my really good friends who I've met through Sandy Cove, Mike Dorsey, who's going to come on. And I want to just tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that he's been doing in this season. That's been an encouragement to me, and I'm sure it could be an encouragement to others. So let me go ahead and get Mike on here, and we can have a good conversation. Mike, it is good to have you on the Morning Cheer broadcast. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome, man. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of give the specs on a little bit of, married, kids, all that kind of stuff, and just for those who are tuning in that might not know you already.
All right, cool. No problem. Well, let's see. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. So I am a Marylander. I spent about 13 years, though, in Ohio. Graduated from Cedarville University and then eventually Faith Seminary in Tacoma, Washington, as well as The Ohio State University in
Go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes, OHIO. And met my wife. We're going to be celebrating our 10-year anniversary, let's see, on the 29th. So
nice. Congratulations.
10 years. So I must be doing something right because she still stays around. So met her in Ohio. She's from Wilmington, Ohio, by way of some other places, but that's where we met. We met in church ministry.
Nice.
So what's been awesome about that is that she has always been my best friend. We were best friends before we got married, and we are still best friends. She is my best friend. She knew things about me that I had never told anyone and probably will never tell anyone but her. So, and we have a beautiful son who is a handsome son. He's 8 years old, little Mike Jr. He may or may not gallivant in here just to see what daddy's up to. And yeah, we live back here in Baltimore. We serve in ministry at my home church, Mount Pleasant Church and Ministries, down in Baltimore. I was born and raised in that church, and grew up there. And then it was nice because I got to leave and kind of just see something else and get to see a lot of other different things in the course of my ministry. And so here we are now. So yeah, that's where we're at.
That's awesome. It's interesting to have that experience where you get to kind of boomerang back. For many of us, and it was part of my story too, I had time at Sandy Cove, and then I went out and did other things and then came back. And it's so interesting to have that perspective where you see ministry in different contexts, but then come back and then see it with a different set of eyes when you get to go out and try it somewhere else.
That's
Mike,
right.
talk a little bit about your connect points with Sandy Cove. Was your initial connect out at Camp Sandy Cove? Is that
no? Oh, yes. It was the father-son camp in what's that? Virginia?
Yeah, West Virginia. Yep.
West Virginia. Yeah. I remember that. I got invited to speak at the father-son camp, and that was the rest is history. I think got to speak at the father-son camp. And then it was right after my stint on Biggest Loser. We'll talk about that at some point, I'm sure. But I met Morgan McRae and his wife. His wife happened to be a big fan of The Biggest Loser. And so we kind of stayed connected. And then from there, our friendship kind of bloomed and blew up in a good way. So I would come and speak to your summer staff. For their chapel at night, and that was actually a treat for me. It was always nice because it was nice for several reasons. One was whenever a preacher gets to preach, you can't be upset about that, right? But then it was just nice. It was refreshing to actually interact with college students again. Very early in my career, I was one of the assistant directors of admission at Cedarville in charge of multicultural recruitment. And so to actually get back into some of that college ministry stuff, just enough to say, "Ooh, I miss it," but no, I don't. And then, but no, it was great. And then you guys invited me to do week 5 of family camp, which totally not only was it and I never got to tell you. Well, I may have told you pieces of it, Stephen, but it was truly a blessing, not just for me, but also to my family. Because a lot of times you hear about those in ministry who do ministry and the family is kind of disconnected from it. But to be able to actually do ministry and the family be a part of it and actually get to take part in what's happening, that was so I just want to thank you guys for affording us that opportunity, because it truly was a blessing to us in more ways than you would even we could even count. So yeah, it was awesome.
That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I'll tell you, as the director of programs, it was one of the hardest jobs that you have when you try to invite speakers in and you explain to them, no, we want you to bring your family. We want you to immerse yourself and experience it. And a lot of people that are kind of speakers on the circuit are kind of like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, bring your wife, bring your kids, they'll get to play. And you were just gonna kind of we'll play for food, speak, and then we'll do some stuff. And so we've got some that do. They immerse, they come and bring their families, and
it was awesome.
The secret sauce is that we get your kids in love with us, and that's why we get you coming back over and over. So I'm glad to hear that was true for you all, and I know that there were several people that were really, really blessed by your ministry when you're with us. And I was talking to one of our other staff members. He said, "Who's going to be on tonight?" And I told him it was you. And he goes, "I'd love to hear that guy speak." But he was talking about the link with the staff. And he goes, "That's too late. I can't stay up till 10 o'clock to hear, because we put that service for our summer staff so late so it fits into their schedule." Yeah. I had to speak at it once last summer, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done to be coherent and making sense that late at night. Especially I've got little kids, and that was way past their bedtime and my bedtime. So it was really bad news when I got up. I'm like, this felt like I was in a dream sequence.
I'll give you a secret. The day I know that I'm coming up there to do that late night service is the day I actually either take off all together at work that day, or I actually leave work early so I can get home and take a nap. So
yes, you are very wise to plan your day out that way.
that's right.
So, Mike, I want to ask you kind of if you can talk a little bit about just personally, how are you navigating this kind of COVID season? I mean, it caught all of us, kind of off guard. Nobody really truly saw what we're experiencing now. Or if you did, you need to tell me how you figured that out before it happened. But, how are you kind of navigating through this season now that we're kind of, in it? We're in the thick of it now, right?
Oh, yeah. Man, I'm gonna tell you something. It was very surreal. I remember, and with me is always anecdotes, but this one was wild because my day job, I serve chief learning officer for one of the state's largest agencies, the Department of Human Services, and so we have about by the time it's all said and done, we have close to 7,000 folk who do the work of DHS, either their full-time merit staff of the state or their contractual or county workers that do state functions and that sort of thing. And what was fascinating about it, we were watching it, you'd watch the news, oh, this is in China, oh, this is over there, and you're like, okay. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, you start hearing, oh, wait a minute, this is here now. And we're shutting down the airports. And then finally, I remember talking with my staff the week of the day the governor proclaimed the state of emergency. March 9th, I think, was the day that he did it. And I said, woo, we need to start preparing for this because this is not going to be good. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking they wouldn't close us down. Like they wouldn't do that, right? And sure enough, we sat, and my boss kept saying to me, she said, just watch the governor today at 4. Well, what's going to happen? Just watch the governor today at 4. But what? You just need to watch the governor at 4. So watch the governor at 4 was like, oh. So sure enough, watch the governor that Thursday, that Friday. My team, we all were working from home. My wife and I, we actually work in the same building, and she was actually home for the whole gamut that following Tuesday because there were some things that had to be tied up at her job, her part of the job. And we've been working from home since March 13th.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was just wild because it took about 2 weeks just to get, I'm in these meetings where we're talking about, closing down the departments of social services, and we're talking about not, having public access, but then working on getting all of the staff to be teleworking. And so it was like I was bombarded with all that information. But then meanwhile, I'm trying to make sure my family's taken care of. I have 2 parents who are in their 60s. I have family and friends. I have church, members that I'm interested in. Like we're trying to navigate around all that. And it took about 2 weeks before I could actually say, okay, all right, I can breathe, because you were balancing the professional with the personal. And what I found was it was hard for me because all of a sudden now my routine was taken out of whack. Like everybody's routine was taken out of whack, but it was like, okay, I can get up and I can, within 5 minutes, I'm at work. Whereas I have to commute to downtown Baltimore, or sometimes I'm in a different part of the state. And so it was like you're trying to get used to that. My nights turned into days. My days turned to nights. It was really, what was happening was that it was taking a toll on me. I'm going to be honest. It was taking a toll on me physically, mentally, but definitely spiritually, because physically it was just, I wasn't necessarily making the best choices of my nutrition, right? Definitely wasn't being active. You had the emotional side of it because every time you turned on the news, it was like you didn't know what to believe. You didn't know what was going on. Then the news that you were getting wasn't encouraging. But then the biggest piece of it was the spiritual piece, because our natural affinity is not to go to God, right? Our natural affinity is to go towards figuring out how to fix things. I'm just being honest. That's the innate sin nature that we all contain. And so I realized that I actually had to be intentional more than ever about actually getting into the Word of God. And that's actually, what ended up happening was because I had a routine. I would get up in the morning, I would do my quiet time. Part of my commute would be a part of that talk with the Lord. Like, all right, Lord, help, my commute to work. Right before I started the day at work, I have Jesus. Oh man, my Jesus book, Sarah Young,
Oh, Jesus Calling.
Dear Jesus, dear Jesus, dear Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
My dear Jesus, and I would sit and read, one day of that, one passage of that each day, have my Bible right there. But now it was like, no, that's not happening. The book is still in my office downtown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really rough. But we've gotten to a point now where we started to be intentional about it, go out for walks, back on the nutrition thing, like really making sure that my nutrition's good, because I don't want them to have to roll me out of here, here after it's all said and done. There's suits I still have to be able to fit in when I get back to work. So, so anyway, so that's just kind of the long version of.
Yeah, no, I will tell you, for me, and it was the same. March 13th was the day that we kind of closed up shop and we started teleworking, telecommuting, and it was the same thing. All of what was normal just kind of went out the window. And for me, what I realized as just a personal issue, but also a leadership issue, was this idea of really kind of struggling with feeling as though I lost control. I would say it better now that I've kind of done some studying and some soul searching on it. I think I lost the illusion of control.
Yes.
I thought I was in control. I wasn't ever really actually in control.
Sure.
But this idea that, I have created my rhythms, I have created my path, I have created, and you go, that's just not when everything got stripped away. I remember it was a Sunday morning, and I was like, the only thing that kept me sane was going outside and taking a walk.
Yeah.
But I remember being in my neighborhood one Sunday taking a walk, and I thought I would never in a million years take a walk on a Sunday morning. I'd be up or figuring out how to serve and volunteer and do all these things, and I'd be busy. And I remember listening, and it was so quiet and so peaceful. And I thought, this exists every Sunday, and I miss it.
Yeah.
And so I realized, I was like, okay, I need to start paying attention differently.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, I needed to rebuild with structure. I needed to reintroduce routines. And then I had some really wise counsel a few weeks in, where they were kind of like, you need to go to work. Like, there was the allowance from the way that the law was done for me to go in because of some of the tests that I needed to do, that I wasn't really at risk. And because we've been essentially shut down, I mean, it's as safe there as it is anywhere because no one's there.
Sure.
But I will tell you, that 20-minute commute from my house on the way in, it was that same thing. It was like processing, what is today going to look like? God, what do you want to do? Reveal yourself to me. And then even more so important for my family was the 20 minutes coming home, where I was kind of decompressing and leaving everything behind, so that when I walked in the door, it was like, okay, how do I be present to my wife and kids? And when the commute was me coming from downstairs to upstairs, the engine was still going. And so I was in the kitchen, but I was not in the house.
That's right.
And it was not good for a few moments, and it was completely on me. And I'm grateful for a wife who's incredibly tolerant, and kind of helped just kind of hold things together as I was trying to figure out how to get my feet under me. Because it really did. Those first few weeks, it just was like, what is happening?
Yep.
It was just crazy. So at some point you decided, you know what? And I'm vaguely remembering at some point you got on Facebook Live and you're like, I think I'm going to do this Bible study. What do y'all think? And then you just started doing this Bible study.
Yeah.
What motive was that? What was the motivation to kind of get into that?
It was one of those things that I started, like I said, being intentional about talking to the Lord, saying, all right, Lord, what, obviously you want my attention. And I personally believe that all this was allowed to happen universally because I do believe the Lord is speaking through it, and that's another conversation. But Lord, you're talking to me. What is it that you're saying? And he became very clear. Like, I want you to get into my word right now. I want you to take advantage of this season of getting into my word, because there are some things that you're going to be doing after this is over, or after this, we've moved on to the next piece of this. And I need you to be prepared. This is an opportunity for you to get yourself prepared for what's next. And so with that, I said, all right, I want you to get in the word. I'm going to study. And so I threw it out there, and I just threw it to a friend. I said, hey, I'm going to start doing a little Bible study. He said, why don't you do it online? Huh? Like, do what? What? And it was a group of guys that I had been meeting with already, that I had been, periodically we get together and do Bible study and stuff, and we hadn't been able to do it. And so I ran it past them. They said, let's do it online. Like, why not? Like, invite anybody who wants to come. And I said, what? And, Stephen, to be honest with you, stuff like that, as it may come as a shock to those that know me, but that is like making me really vulnerable, because there's the part of you that's just like, it's one thing if you invite me to come speak somewhere and I go speak, right? But it's another thing for me to actually manufacture this. And my mindset was, I'm manufacturing this opportunity, right? And so you get kind of caught up in the flesh, like, nobody's gonna, what is this? Like, what are we doing? This is crazy. And so I threw it out there. I said, hey, if I did a Bible study, would you be interested? And a whole bunch of people said, oh my gosh, I would. And so what I did was, I said, all right, Lord, what passage are we doing? And in my quiet time, he took me to the book of Joshua. And, it's one of those things that I remember back in Ohio. What kept me in Ohio so long, even after leaving Cedarville, was I actually took on the role as an associate at Bible Missionary Baptist, which was the church my wife was a member of. And the senior pastor there, Curtis Somerville, really took it upon himself to he actually, believe it or not, he picked me up out of a dark moment in my life. And he kind of like nursed me back to health, to be honest with you. And part of that included becoming his assistant. I was his assistant pastor for a number of years. And one of my responsibilities was the Wednesday night Bible study. And he's in the family of expositors. So, for those that don't know, you have expository preachers, you have topical preachers, right? And then you have preachers who they do what they just feel like doing, right? But they are very intentional about expository. And expository, for those that don't know, is basically you take a text and you literally walk through it and do whatever the text tells you. So, it's one thing if, like, I want to get up and I want to do a sermon on love, right? I'll go and I may pick passages to talk about love, but expository says, nah, this is what the passage says. There is something about love in it, but you also have to talk about the rest of the stuff because you have the contextual issues with it. And so he kind of got me in that mindset of what it means to be an expositor. And we would go through some just pieces of scripture that you don't pay attention to, but it opened up my ministry. And so we look at Joshua, and it has been incredible. And now, knowing some of the things that we're at we just finished chapter 8 and 9 last week, and tomorrow night we're going chapter 10. But just in those 10 chapters is very clear why the Lord placed it on my heart to do, just because of some of the themes that are already starting to show up in the book of Joshua, especially as the themes start to show up in my life. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I will tell you that one of the things that I've been leading our team through over the past few weeks here is, inside of all of this, while there's mess and while there's confusion, and while there's chaos, there's incredible opportunity, right? And I think that the people who are going to thrive inside of, I hate this term, the new normal, but whatever the post-COVID culture looks like, it's going to be led by people who learned things in it because they went through it, and so, and what a better book than Joshua to kind of learn a lot of those lessons. I'll tell you, you could have stayed in Joshua 1, 2, and 3 for the rest of the year, and there's enough there that we could have gone, deep into. And I'm obsessed with some of those, really just the details inside of those stories that are lessons in and of themselves,
big time.
And so you're 10 chapters in. What are the big takeaways for you in what you've kind of in this time going through Joshua? Because it's not your first time ever reading the book of Joshua. No. But this time, what is the thing that you go like, man, these are nuggets I didn't realize were there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the first chapter, when you start realizing the magnitude of what was placed on his shoulders, up until this point, he had been, riding the secondary to Moses, right? And so the hits were getting to Moses; they weren't touching him. And so the first piece of it that really just was profound to me was when God said, "Moses, thy servant, is dead; like he's gone." Like you all, as he's directing the people, you all have to, when you start studying that word dead, it's, a lot of times on the surface we say, okay, he died physically, he's gone. But when you start really digging into it, you start finding that, well, it's even deeper than that. The ways of life under Moses are gone. Your new normal is here. What you counted as considered status quo is now changing. And then when you start looking into it, think about it. At this point, the only people that are remaining from the generation of Moses are Joshua and Caleb. Everybody else is dead, right? They've died out. And so you have a new generation who now they have to learn a whole new way of doing things, but there's still a remnant of what they had in what Joshua and Caleb had gleaned. So that was like the first big piece to me, was like, a lot of times we live in a culture that tries to throw away the older generation. And I've been guilty of it. I've been, being a Gen Xer who has millennial-ish ways, there's a part, we look at the baby boomers, we're like, would you just stop? And I'm being real, and I've had conversations with folk like this. And, and you talk to baby boomers and they're like, well, we kind of want to stop, but we don't know who we're going to hand it off to, right? And so you got that backwards and forward. But one of the things that I have come to respect is that there is something that our baby boomer generation knows. And it's important for me as a Gen Xer to figure out how to grab that stuff so that we can have a continuation of leadership. If that makes sense or not?
Yeah, no, I think one of the places, and I know this has happened before, but and it talks about in Joshua 1, this be strong and courageous, and you did an incredible job kind of unpacking and talking about all of what that really means. But it's interesting that you see that phrase throughout generations in the Old Testament, and it's one of those things that when you kind of dial out and look at it, you go like, oh, that's something that passes down. Now, it might preach differently to each of whoever's saying it, right? But it's still the nuggets there. And to what you're saying, even kind of in our context today, and I think it's one of the things I love about Sandy Cove as a ministry is that we have generations and generations and iterations. This all harkens back to the fact that we are birthed out of a radio ministry.
That's right.
And so, Dr. Palmer was leading for his generation. And while there were things that had to change and had to go away, at some point the radio broadcast ended. But that wasn't the end of what God was doing through Sandy Cove. And then it was, Bible conferences. And then from there it went to family camps. And so it's had iterations, but the stuff that needs to be kind of passed off generation to generation, that's the nugget. It's for us in our context, the high value that's placed on Scripture that says, we are going to be a place that puts an incredibly high value on Bible teaching. It might look really different. I think about some of the things that we do in our family camp setting, and I think, I don't know if Dr. Palmer would be all that happy about how we're doing it right now. But the reality is, I think you would be happy that 74 years later on this property, the value, the be strong and courageous is still being passed down, right?
Yeah. Think about it. What we're doing right now, a radio interview, that was what it was. Yeah. Now we're doing it on social media. So where everybody had a radio back then, everybody now has a Facebook account.
Yeah. And
so it the same kind of, I could see us have, 75 years ago, you and I couldn't be having this conversation. wouldn't be alive, but you get the idea, like things like this could actually be happening. And you're right, the message has never changed. It's just the method by which we move the message. And I think that's something that really kind of strikes me as you were talking. That really strikes me about that.
Yeah, so I'll put you on the spot, and Mike has been incredibly gracious to me because the prep that I wanted to put in tonight didn't really happen, but I know him well enough to know that all you have to do is ask a good question and he can give us incredible content, because that's what happens when you put a godly guy behind the microphone.
In other words, he's saying that I'm long-winded. I got
it. I'm saying that I will trust you because I know that God's spoken through you in that Bible study. That's why you're here. And so I will. I'm curious if you're willing to speak a little to what do you feel like God is stirring up in you? What is the thing that you go, I know now why I'm teaching Joshua, because I'm peeking out at what next is. Are you ready to speak to that? I realize I've asked you to kind of go public with something that you might not be ready to. So you can pass. I don't think anyone would be offended.
No. So where I'm at right now is I am in a place right now where you hang around me long enough, you hear me say something, I talk about a process. Process is a series of events that must take place in order for one big event to happen. And a lot of times I liken it to when you're learning math. One of the, you take easy math, alpha, 1 + 1 = 2, that stuff we can do in our sleep, right? But then all of a sudden we started doing equations, and the teacher says, in order for you to be able to get 100, the top grade on this assignment, you have to show your work. And I asked a buddy of mine, I said, why did y'all tell us to do that? He said, well, some people are really good that they can just look at it and they can kind of just go, and they don't have to do all the steps to solve the problem. And for the most part, in basic math, yeah, that's easy. But when you start getting the more complex math, when you start getting into calculus, even advanced geometry, physics, all that stuff, if you don't get in the habit, and watch what I'm saying here, the habit of going through all the steps, then what ends up happening is you may not necessarily come up with the right answer to the equation. And so a lot of times we live our lives and we're like, hey, I got it. I got this thing figured out, right? And then all of a sudden, later on, you hit a hard problem, and you can't get through it, and you realize, man, there were some steps that I kind of skipped, and I didn't really take advantage of it. And so, for me, one of the things is I realized that there's a couple things that need to happen, and it all pertains to making sure that I can be the best leader for my family, but also that, first of all, there's some habits that I have to get rid of, but also number two, there's some work that has to be done. And in this season, the Lord has allowed me to take advantage of this opportunity to shut down and start going from A through Z so we can get these things solved. So for instance, I kind of allude a little bit, for those that don't know, I was season 14 Biggest Loser. And this was back in 2012, 2013. And went on this TV show to lose weight, and you all watched me, really become Big Mike in mind, not in body, because I was shrinking. I was looking good, man. I came back. I was a little C celebrity. I want to say I'm not gonna say I was an A-list celebrity. I was more like a C-list celebrity, but I was a celebrity nonetheless, right? And what's I laugh at it because I was looking at pictures the other day. I was still a big boy. Like I started the show at 444 and ended the show at 308 or 309. So I was still in my 300s. And while some people are like, well, that's impressive, well, that still wasn't where I should be. I should be in my 200s. And so I wasn't done with the job. But then what happened was I kind of started living life and started getting this. And slowly but surely, I started getting out of those habits because I never really took the time to really lock in those habits. And then all of a sudden, before long, 3 years jumps by, I've gained every ounce back. Plus, they brought back friends, And so with that, one of the things that the Lord had to really show me was, you got to take care of this, because how can you go around preaching and teaching discipline to other folk, and you clearly aren't showing discipline in your own life? And Stephen, I'm gonna be honest with you, that was hard. I'm gonna be honest, man, that was hard. You can go through my social media, and about 2 years after Biggest Loser, you'll start noticing that there were no pictures of me. Like there were pictures of things I was doing. There were definitely pictures of the kid, my wife, but there were no pictures of me, because I went through 2.5 to 3 years of just straight. I wasn't diagnosed with this, but I'm sure it was there, some depression. Why? Because I felt like I was a fraud. I felt like I was a fake. I felt like a failure, right? And all that was Satan really trying to keep me distracted, because one of the things we realize, and we kind of see this in the study of Joshua, is that the enemy, when the enemy knows that you have a chance, they will do everything they can to make sure that they can conquer you. How about the Gibeonites, right? The Gibeonites knew that they didn't stand a chance. They knew that the Israelites were going to get them. So what did they do? They said, well, you know what? We got to come up with a way that we can trick them. And then that way, if we trick them, then all of a sudden it becomes a different story. And that really showed me about what Satan was doing in my life, was he was kind of tricking me, and so what had to happen was I ended up taking this time to really, getting close with the word, really spending time in prayer, talking to the Lord, really spending time, trying to listen and be present to my family, but then also realizing that I'm not going to be any good to them if I'm dead somewhere, because I could have prevented it, And so this season, the Lord has really said, look, you need to focus in on getting healthy, both in your body, physically, fiscally, right? Fiscally, like talking about budgeting and finance and that sort of thing. I love my job, and I don't necessarily see myself leaving that full time just yet. At least until my 10-year anniversary there, so that I can be vested with the state, right? But who knows what God will do? And so with that, there's some things that God is going to do with me in my speaking ministry. But in order for me to get there, there's some stuff that still has to happen on the inside, and that's kind of what the Lord has been kind of chipping away at with me during this season.
No, that's good, and I a lot of that resonates with me in different parts and times in my story. I actually had some stuff planned to say that I would normally say after we say goodbye to you, but it's is right on task. I kind of want to ask you to stick around and just kind of ride this out with me if you're willing to stay awake another 5 or 10 minutes. One of the things that we talk about in our context, in our staff, and in our environment at Sandy Cove a lot is, health. One of the things that's fascinating to me is health is health no matter what you're talking about. And there's a lot of kind of interdisciplinary things that are true, that whether you're talking about your emotional health, your mental health, your physical health, or your spiritual health, there's some similarities to how you pursue that in each of those areas. While, they might look unique, it's about habits, right? It's about disciplines. But the one key question that I kind of boiled down to in trying to answer the question, are you healthy? Isn't, are you achieved? Like, are you your target weight? Are you your target sleep time, or whatever wherever you put your habits? For me, healthy is really kind of defined in this one key question: which direction are your feet pointed? Are your feet pointed towards the fridge or towards the couch? Right? Are your feet pointed towards the cross or towards your own agenda? And so for me, it's been fascinating, and it came up in a conversation today with one of my mentors, advisors, friends, who kind of leans into this idea. And he's done Ironman, triathlon, all these different things that I would never dream of doing. But he talks about this idea that, Scripture calls us to run our race, to press in, but it doesn't call us to sprint. No. And if you're inside of any kind of leadership role, whether it's this COVID thing that we're trying to navigate, or just in leadership in general, you got to learn how to pace yourself, but you also got to have your feet pointed in the right direction. Right. You got to be chasing what's healthy. And to your point, I think the one thing that Satan's great at is just that little, the effect of kind of tilting your feet a little off, and then sooner than later, 2 degrees off the mark. And then, 10 days later, you're not even close to heading the direction you thought you wanted to. And so I'm just curious where you've seen kind of the interdisciplinary connection between your physical journey towards physical health, and then also kind of the mental and spiritual. Like, where are the parallels that you've found inside of that?
Well, going back to Joshua, one of the things that you will notice is that whenever he actually spends time getting his instructions from the Lord, you end up seeing the results that you're supposed to see. It's in those times when he tries to kind of do it on his own, right? Or when the text doesn't give us the illusion that took place, that's when you wonder, what really happened there, right? And for me, what I have noticed was that, and funny, I go back to the Biggest Loser Ranch.
Sure.
And one of the questions that came up was, man, why were you so successful? I had no choice but to rely on God during that whole process. We didn't have our families. I didn't have access to the internet. I did not have the daily distractions that we have now. And it was funny. I was looking back in my journals from my time on the ranch, and so many conversations I had with the Lord through that experience. And where things went south with my health, I have to say, was when I just kind of was like, all right, Lord, you're there. I'm giving you what I'm supposed to give you, sort of, kind of, not really. But I got this now, right? And subconsciously, that's what I was saying. On the surface, oh my gosh, God was out in service in church. I'm worshiping Him all the time. God, I'm serving. Oh yeah, big time. But deep down inside, was I really giving it all to Him, right? And one of the things I see is when you start looking at that story, these stories that come up in there, is that the only way they were able to make it through was because of God.
Mm.
And I already know that by the time it's said and done, when you're actually finally looking at these pictures where I went beyond what I did on The Biggest Loser, and you actually see that, I know for fact that the only person that's going to be able to take the credit for that is God.
Mm.
And that's where that stuff is paralleled. I think that a lot of times God wants us to look for man to get the answers. Listen, there's so much confusion right now, and this is not political. But one of the things that we have to pay attention to is that the president, the governor, the mayor, the council, county executives, they are not priests. They are civil leaders. And what you notice with Joshua never claimed to be the priest. He left the spiritual stuff up to the priests. He let the Levites handle the business. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were the ones that handled the spiritual things. And so I think a lot of times we look for answers in our government officials. No, they're not going to have the answers. I pray that they're listening to the Lord, right? And that the Lord is guiding them, right? But actually what we need to be doing is being on our faces before God. God, what is it that you'll have me do in this situation? God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a power of love and a sound mind. So me, for instance, I went through this phase. I'm looking at the news, and the folk that are dying from this thing that are my age look like me. They're big and black. They're dying from this, right? And they have these underlying health conditions, high blood pressure, they have high cholesterol, they have pre-diabetes or diabetes, right? And these are people who are like me. And I'm sitting there like, Lord, I'm never leaving the house. Like, I'm not leaving the house. And all of a sudden the Lord was like, stop that. Like, I got you, and that's just what had to happen. Like, the Lord had to allow me to see. And there are times where I'm going through, and I'm on a special program that's actually designed to work on mindset. And but I had to go back to the basics with it. I had to stop, trying to help everybody else and start the process of helping myself. And then what the Lord did was He honored it so that now some other people are a part of it as well. And I'm able to have that accountability piece because the Lord was allowed me to understand I'm not going to be able to do this without Him. And that's where the victory is going to come.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that when you do a word study into the Hebrew in the Old Testament, there's a word that oftentimes gets translated, and even some of the kind of popular, very quotable verses inside of the Old Testament, it talks about our heart. And for I'll try to stay away from commentary, but I think our current version of our church, we love to talk about emotions, and we love to talk about our heart in that context and what am I feeling. And the reality is, if you look at the translation of what that word in essence is, it really is talking about kind of your inner being, and it's kind of really probably better translated mind. And I had this realization a couple years ago that I'm like, man, I've been around the church a long time, and I've heard very few people preach about your mindset and your thinking and like the neuroscience. I mean, you look at people, if you're familiar with Dr. Caroline Leaf, who's a Christian neuroscientist, she'll talk a mile a minute. You got to be able to stay with her. But the stuff that she basically teaches is how our brains are physically wired. And, spoiler alert, it all matches up with Scripture.
That's right.
But you don't hear enough people, in my opinion, that really lean in and preach and talk about the fact that we've got to take control of our minds. That, that's where the battlefield really exists in a lot of ways. and is where things are won. And it's not just emotions are results, right? Emotions are a lot of times external or cause and effect. But the reality is, the mind is something that there's a lot of scripture about, and I just don't feel like we spend enough time really digging in to where that calls us to.
What did David say? He says, "Search me, O Lord, search my mind, know me, know my thoughts."
Yeah.
Right? Like the whole idea of it's, whoo, yeah. Don't start. We can't do this tonight, Stephen. Because it's so true. Like it's really it. Yeah, yeah. There's a connection between the heart and the mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Because what's going on up there that actually guides, if you keep it real, more often than not, if we're starting to be real, sometimes our actions are dictated by what's going on in our mind.
Yeah, well, and even to your points that you talk about developing habits and how the habits stick, it's all related to your neuroscience. It's all related to your mind, and it's all related to, how you're pursuing truth and how you live in truth, and ultimately, I heard a teacher once say, the scripture in the New Testament says, "Take every thought captive." I think it often gets preached in the context of like, hey, if you're thinking something wrong, grab that one and throw it away, but that's not what it necessarily says. It says, take every thought captive. And so that means even the good thoughts, take that captive and kind of go like, okay, God, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? Some of those the teaching that has been directed at bringing out all that we're called to as believers to how we think has been probably some of the most transformative teaching that I've sat under, because it actually, I think, is where we're called to, it's how we're called to navigate. And in a situation like this, for me inside of COVID, I saw it quickly where it felt like the bottom dropped out and my mind was like, and I did the same thing where I was like, I don't know if I think I'm just afraid of getting it. Like, what happens if what if this is how I die?
Yeah.
Or, we had this thing in January where my wife and I both got sick at different times, and having one of us down and the other one having taken care of the kids, it was torture. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if one of us has to quarantine, or if we have to try to quarantine an 18-month-old, I'm like, how do you do that? And all of a sudden, my mind's a mile a minute. And you look at it now and I'm like, Satan must have been like, got him.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't thinking about ministry. I wasn't thinking about what could I do, who has needs, how do I love my neighbor. None of that was on the playlist. It was all, I'm gonna die. This is how I go out, and it's gonna interrupt my schedule. I had plans today.
That's right.
So, well, we could cover 1,000 topics, and I would enjoy myself, and I'm sure others would, but I do have a bedtime, and I'm sure you do as well. I'm incredibly grateful for you making time for us. If you don't mind, why don't you let people know if they want to kind of follow your story, interact with you, where do they find Mike on the internet?
Man, okay, so let's see. Instagram, I do a lot with Instagram. I'm ML Dorsey 78. ML Dorsey 78. That's my Instagram handle. I do Twitter a little bit. And then my Facebook is Michael L. Dorsey. So if you just did facebook.com/Michael L. Dorsey, you can find me. And then you can also email me at Michael, Michael, at michaeldorsey.com. So if you don't remember any of those, just email me at michaeldorsey.com. And that's where you'll find me. So there you go.
See if this works. Did I get that right? Oh, I added the L. How about that?
Yeah. There it is. Look at that. I love, see, it's great, this technology we have.
Technology is pretty crazy. How about that?
It is, man.
The fact that I can do it, I'm impressing myself. If I got it right, it'd be even better.
Michael at michaeldorsey.com. Yep. Email me, and then we'll go from there. I'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for making time for us tonight. We are so grateful that you would be generous with your time and share what God's laid on your heart and what you've been learning. And I can only imagine that I'm not the only one who's going amen to everything that you've been saying. And so I appreciate your generosity and making time for us tonight. It's been a fun time to meet together.
My pleasure, homie. Love you, brother.
I love you too. Absolutely. I look forward to once this craziness is done, we'll go and we'll have a good, healthy meal together.
That's right.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time. Well, I hope that blessed you as much as it blessed me. I did. I had a one day today that was filled with just nonstop meetings and challenges. And the reality is I was looking forward to this all day long because I absolutely love Mike and being encouraged through the word, through him. He has a gift. And so I'm grateful for his time. We went a little bit long tonight, but I kind of knew that might happen. Thanks for those of you who stuck around. And we'll look forward to getting together next Monday. We will do, even though it's Memorial Day, we will do Monday, Morning Cheer Monday, and look forward to being with those of you who can join us. And for those that are watching this at any other time, thanks for tuning in and sticking around. And please know that sandycove.org is where you need to find us. And we'll be putting all of our updates there. We will be making announcements this week relative to what our plans are for the summer. And we look forward to finding God in all of this and holding on to the truths that have been proclaimed for a very long time, 74 years on our property. But before that, Dr. Palmer was on the radio and started his radio broadcast and finished it with Jesus Never Fails. And we cling to that as we know it is true today as it was the day he said it. Thanks for spending time with us. Have a blessed evening. Good night.